officer was immediately on alert, seeing 3 days' worth of newspapers gathered around the front porch, and while the storm door was closed, it was unlocked and the front door was ajar. The officer received no response to his knocks, other than the sound of a dog barking from inside. He called for backup, and while waiting, walked the perimeter of the house of the family and the lack of rigor mortis, the medical examiner estimated the Columbos had died between 11 p.m. on May 4th, 1976 and 1 a.m. on May 5th, 1976. At the time the autopsies were being performed, the evidence technician for the Elk Grove Village Police Department pried open the trunk of Frank Columbo's Thunderbird at the PD garage. She was also headstrong, as well as demonstrated by her decision to drop out of school when she was 16. She stole the credit card and the wallet of two fellow employees at Walgreens where she was working, the cosmetics counter, and racked up thousands of dollars in charges. Although her father made restitution and paid off the amount, in July of 1974, she was convicted of deceptive practices and sentenced to 2 years probation. Probation she was still on at the time of the her father had struck her boyfriend in the head with a rifle butt. In October, Mitchell and Subinski met up with Patty at the Where Else Lounge, where they drank and danced. Under the impression that Mitchell was a heavy who did favours for his friend, helped by the gun he toted, Patty discussed the animosity between DeLuca had provided